welcome to a new chapter of Beyond the Brink and Fighting Back. I'm the host, Rosemary Armeo. And if you recall, I told you a long time ago I was doing this podcast in part so I could introduce you to some of the cool people that I have met in like 50-year journalism career. And one of those people is with me tonight. It's Mike Fabey. I knew Mike way back when he was nothing. You were nothing, Mike. You were just learning how to do investigative reporting.
I'm still the same old nothing, believe me.
No, not true. Mike has spent
Just a little bit
at
older.
least 30 years since I met him as I was director of investigative reporting and editors, a training group for journalists who wanted to do more than daily journalism. And Mike was beginning what has turned into really a 3-decade career looking mostly at Navy and military affairs. I thought he would be the perfect person. He has you can find on our website his entire lengthy biography, but he's won just about all the awards you can win for military based reporting. He's written 2 books. We'll talk about them later in the session. And I thought he would be the perfect person to talk about the many military issues that seem to be in the news these days. And so, Mike, we made a list. We talked earlier and made a list of all we might talk about. And I'm going to just jump right in. Let's start with the Caribbean. Are we pirates in the Caribbean?
By law, we are. I mean, that it's international waters. We are basically making ourselves judge, jury, executioner in the case of the strikes, and seizing, seizing the ships like we are. I mean, that's really just the kind of quintessential act of piracy. So, I mean, that's yeah, by definition, that seems to be exactly what we're doing. And I will tell you right now, I've actually had U.S. Navy officers say to me, yeah, so
Yeah.
now we're pirates. We have that going for us in a very disgusted, disheartening way.
Yeah, that was my question. Your sources are very deep and traditional. As you know, I guess if you're not in the Hegseth regime, you are traditional. They don't like this.
No, not at all. First of all, they don't, the officer, especially at sea, when you're an officer at sea or you're in charge of all the vessels, the flotillas, and everything like that at sea, you go by rules of engagement. And we've had a very strong set rules of engagement that's been guiding the U.S. Navy since there was a U.S. Navy. We're centuries now, and now they have no idea what the rule of engagement could be for today. And
Wow.
they're very, this is very upsetting. It goes against everything that they've been trained for, and they're they're not sure exactly what's going to happen next.
So I'm right in thinking this has not happened before in American history. We've not
Not
seen.
like not like this. Not like this. You've seen some things overseas, maybe over in sort of the Asia Pacific during the Vietnam War. I mean, there were a lot of things that went back and forth and everything like that. But that was, I mean, there was an actual conflict going on. There's not a declared war. Um, the in those other cases, you could definitely argue that our forces were in danger in some way. I mean, they put themselves in that danger, but they're still in
Mhm.
danger. And that's the big thing is that's you're not supposed to fire upon, other vessels and everything like that. You are in some kind of danger or to represent danger to the U.S. or something you're protecting. And in this case, that's not existing. So no, nothing like this has happened before.
So the incident back in it's September now when it happened, although we found out about it much later, where a boat was bombed by us and kind of wrecked apart, and but 2 men are hanging on, clinging, trying to get saved, apparently, or maybe I guess the military is saying they were trying to protect their stash of 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 what drugs, and we bombed them. And then it seemed like the admiral in charge of the operation was he they pointed the finger at him and said he said it was okay. And when he testified, he actually did. It sounded to me, I'm a layman, but it sounded to me like he was trying to justify it. Were you surprised by that? What was your reaction to
Uh,
Bradley?
first of all, I have issues with the initial attack.
Okay.
Everyone's concentrating, or a lot of people concentrate on second attack. The initial attack to me is something that is, I find horrific at the very outset. The fact you would be judge, jury, executioner. We have forces that are tailor made for these operations.
Hmm.
They've been doing these operations, they're still doing it. You have Coast Guard ships and Coast Guard crews and special teams sometimes put those Coast Guard teams on Navy vessels, even. And they've been interdicting drugs and drug smuggling all throughout that region.
Right.
So that's been working. So I found that just the fact that they, without any kind of providing evidence for anything like that, said here in international waters, we don't care what we're going to do. Now I've not seen the video, but I've heard people that I know and trust describe it, and from the description of it, that you've got 40 minutes between attacks. That means there was some back and
Wow.
forth going on. Okay,
Wow.
um, you know, by most indications that they're thinking of the Hellfire missile. A Hellfire missile would pretty much, just make splinters of a boat like that. And what they were saying, they've got something that's the wreckage is like that they were hanging on was the size of a dining table. They're flipping it over. They were flipping it over to try to get some kind of what was the best way to stay afloat.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and that's what would seem to me. So in that case, you know, I mean, we took German U-boat commanders. We put them on trial for some of the same things in war.
Right. Right.
And for so to do this, yeah, I was disgusted by it. The Navy officers I know were disgusted by it.
Hmm.
Now in terms of the orders, the way the orders were, we understand were given because we not there's not been a disbursement, of those orders. But from what our understanding is, the way those orders were given, then legally, that officer was within his rights to do that. It kind of reminds me back, when Bill Clinton was, he was brought before Congress, and everyone puts out the whole clip of "I did not have sex with that woman."
That's right.
Um,
I recall
the,
that.
the beginning part we said was, according to your definition, I did not have sex with that woman.
Right.
That, and
Right.
that's what this reminds me
Good
of here.
point.
Technically, they're basically, there's a lot of CYO going on, especially legally.
Yeah.
But at their core, I have none of the officers that I know that I've actually been out, in combat with, if you will, or have actually been in training exercise with, whatever. None of the people I know really think that this is the right thing to do.
Well, it is my theory, and please push back if you disagree, that we're not really trying to stop drugs. We do not really see these ships as a danger to American youth and babies, like people are talking, like the maggots are talking about. But it's part of Pete Hegseth's effort to shift military culture. And he seems to want to focus. His supporters will talk about restoring tough and discipline and basic training to emphasize lethality, right? We're a warrior spirit organization now. We're going to make war, and that this is part of that. Talk a little bit about these efforts of his to shift the culture. He made a lot of headlines just a few weeks back when he called in brass from all over the world to tell them to shave off their beards and get in shape.
I tell you right now, China, Russia, and any of our other adversaries love that. The head of these combatant commands is, somewhere else. That means that they can, that's a great time for them to run ops, to try other kind of shenanigans, when the, teacher's out of the room kind of thing.
Mhm.
So, I mean, yeah, he's apparently has this whole idea, that if you're, unless you're clean shaven, can do a lot of pull ups, that's it. I, on the other hand, I mean, I was on a destroyer in the middle of the Red Sea when you've got inbound ballistic missiles and inbound unmanned systems trying to take out, not only destroyer but everything else in the area, and these guys are knocking them out of the skies with drone missiles. That's combat. That's tough. I
Mm.
mean, you're standing while you watch when you got ballistic missile coming in on you, and your first interceptor doesn't work, and that thing's within seconds of making killing you probably.
Mhm.
And they stand there and basically do their job. That's toughness. I can tell you right now that that the Secretary of Defense, and that is his a title, the Secretary of Defense. The Secretary of Defense made no friends, by doing what he did. And he'll probably argue, I don't need friends. No, you need friends. That is an incredibly political job. I'm not even talking
Sure.
about the politics within DC. I mean, in the military, that's a political job. And believe me, officers can slow walk or stop things in their tracks. And you can get some of them out of the way, and for some things you can do, but not. It's a whole juggernaut you'd have to move, and I don't think he'd be able to do that. And so, not the folks. And you're talking about people who have been in combat, who've been in war, who've faced down adversaries. We've been at this now for decades, right? For decades,
Right.
we've been in some kind of conflict. So these are people who have proved their toughness, and they know it has nothing to do with how clean shaven you are.
So when you watch that show that he put on, and Trump was part of it too, and they
Mm-hmm.
excoriated the shape they were in and their spirit, um, they looked to an outsider, they looked blank. They looked like totally like forcing a blank expression.
Yep.
And we could not tell, was this following orders to be respectful and not show any kind of reaction? Or when you saw it, did you think, oh, these guys
No,
are,
that's their training. If Hegseth gone up there and said how awesome they were, you would have seen the same looks.
aha.
That's their training. That is their training. Their training is whether they are facing bombs or facing Congress or get in the middle of their training is to be military professionals,
Hmm.
and that's what they are. They are professionals. They are
Is Pete
professionals.
Hegseth a military professional?
Well, I'll just say that the recent actions don't suggest something of a military professional. I mean, when you have, for example, when you're going out on, on a public chat forum and talking about war plans, for example,
Yeah.
that's not being a military professional in my mind. Um, um, I, one, it's I will use a little just a little anecdote or something that was with Trump the first time, and that was General Mattis.
Hmm.
Now, everyone said Mad Dog, but his actual nickname was Chaos for a lot of different reasons. But anyway, Mattis had this thing about he would show up unannounced, right into the press bullpen, all the reporters around, and say, "What do you want to talk about?"
This is Mike Fabey we're talking to. He's a longtime journalism professional working in the military, does military books and articles. And Mad Dog that he's talking about is the previous Secretary of not war, but of defense under in the first administration. So he was not afraid to
Oh no, of course not. And all of the real professionals, they have come to realize that the press is part of dealing with not only part of their job, but actually can make their job better,
yeah.
easier, and more effective because they can get their narrative out through the press, through the media. And therefore they can have an impact. They can have an impact on how Congress sees them. They can have an impact on adversaries sees them, on how allies see them, how the public at large sees them. I mean, U.S. Marine Corps actually uses any kind of media engagement as a psyops, psychological
Hmm.
operations. But
Right.
that's being a military professional. That's also shown, hey, I am the secretary. I have no fear of you guys and gals. I
Well,
mean,
Hegseth has done just the opposite from what
yeah,
you're describing, which is
yeah,
embracing the role that the media can play. He's
mm-hmm,
thrown out essentially all the experience and professional people.
yeah.
We have representatives from the My Pillow guy. I didn't even know he had a news organization. They're now covering the Pentagon for us. Is that going to be a
Matt
problem?
Gates is in there.
Yeah, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Is this going to be a problem for people like you who are serious about covering the military, or are you going to just go out and get the story from other people?
So yeah. So to quote from the movie Blazing Saddles, I don't need no stinking badge as in the press badge. No, so this is going to backfire. It's just in a tremendous way. So when as reporters going into the Pentagon, what we're getting from the Pentagon, besides the access and you get to know people and everything, that's a good thing. But what you're getting on a day-to-day basis is the Pentagon's narrative things.
Right.
Right. The Pentagon, is telling, the people there are telling you, hey, okay, this is what's going on. Here's how we see it. We're presenting it. So now they've eliminated that. They eliminated their own story. Right.
Right.
So now you got a whole bunch of ticked off reporters who basically have to work harder for a living. So
It,
now the reporters have to hunt for stories. And at the same time, you have people in the Pentagon who still on their head, who still have their own agenda. That could be their own program. It could be, some kind of technology, like whatever it is. They're now going to be looking to leak to reporters. And nowadays, you are risking not only your job, but your personal freedom if you leak
right.
things.
Right.
Do you think they're going to leak good news? No. No.
So, Mike, what you're describing is a guy, the secretary, who is not understanding the politics of his job, which is to work with people, both your own men and women,
Well,
although,
it certainly has. That's what's for effective for other people in this position,
yeah.
since there's been that position.
But
Yeah.
he is annoyed his top brass. He's let go of a lot of experienced people, and he also isn't working nice with the press. That does sound like a recipe for bad coverage of him.
Oh, of course. And
Yeah.
he'll blame the media for it. Last time when it was all leaking out about some of the certain things he was doing, he came and blamed the media for that, and then fired some of his top advisors,
Yeah.
and
People
everything
right
like
under
that.
him. Hmm.
He seems I don't know because I haven't had a chance to talk about anything like this, but he seems to think that reporters are like a bunch of randy teenagers in a mall on Saturday night wandering the hallways with our ears up against the hall,
Yeah.
and reporters, we are not getting any kind of good exclusives and secret information from there. I I have actually I've only been in two classified briefings at the Pentagon, and I gave both of them.
Wow.
When I went out on the Chinese destroyer, out in the Pacific, and came back with some pictures and observations, I put together a briefing for some certain folks, at the Stars and Bars, who wanted to see what
Right.
I
You want to
saw and
know more
everything like
about?
that. I gave the briefings. They said, "Oh, by the way, this is classified." So that's only classified
Wow.
briefings I've been in.
So you don't anticipate giving more briefings in this current administration, I take it.
So I I don't. That doesn't seem to be happening.
They don't value the discussion, the interplay between
So
journalists and
certainly,
military.
having said that, I will say that still at the at something in the top officer range, we'll have a good dialogue on things.
Okay.
They know that I've seen things or been in places or whatever. And hey, what you think about that? So there's still some that's going to go on. I
Okay.
mean, because they're professionals. We still have some very good, strong professionals there.
Yeah, it,
A
it
lot
does
of them.
worry it does worry me how many of these professionals and experienced people and people who are committed to the civilian rule of the military, Hegseth has let go and Trump has gone after and
Hmm.
gone now. So talk to me a little bit about how you feel seeing our troops in cities.
Well, I mean, again, as the piracy question, that seems to be in direct conflict with our Constitution. Um, and I was really super worried about this even as of a few months ago. I honestly believe that the game, I thought, would be to get people so used to custom ID. I'm sure that's the way right to say it, but
Right.
they would see them all the time. So that come around midterm elections, I thought you might see them all over, and who knew how they would act. However, a couple of things have happened that I think are kind of giving me a little more optimism. One is this discussion now on not following lawful orders.
Yes.
I think it's going to have a lot more folks thinking about that. Thinks people are going to be put in that position, and because they're like going to be, wait a minute, because it's not as if you're not seeing what you're not seeing across the country is this, yeah, that's right. They're following lawful orders. They should be on those boats. You're not seeing that, you know. So that question of lawful orders, I think, is going to make it more difficult for that kind of action later on.
Interesting.
So I think that's one. The other thing is, I think a few months ago that this administration, particularly the president, had enough mojo, political mojo, to move things and people and everything the way he wanted. But right now, is definitely taking some serious hits, starting with the Epstein vote. It seems that a lot of people are willing to push back in ways they weren't willing to before. I mean, yeah, you had I think it was Indiana, I think, that refused to go along to
Yes,
redistricting.
they did.
So again, this would have happened a few months ago. It's happening now. So I think that there's kind of this idea of, wait a minute, we don't have to go along with all this.
Mm-hmm.
We can be more of a Chinese menu of picking and choosing which things we're going to support, which things we're not.
Oh,
So
okay. You have said a lot here. I want you to unpack it a little bit.
yeah,
So I love that you're talking about illegal orders and legal orders.
yeah.
Mark Kelly and other senators and congressmen made, of course, a very controversial commercial reminding the military of what the rule was. And our Secretary of Defense now wants to punish Mark Kelly for this, even though he's a senator. He's no longer on active military duty. The
Right.
secretary thinks he can punish him. I want to ask you about that. And I also want to ask you if you think anybody in the Caribbean was thinking about whether this was legal or not when they were told to strike again on that disabled boat.
So with Kelly, I mean, so the Secretary of Defense doesn't have the power just to bring someone and punish them. I mean, now they could, try to bring back in uniform and bring them before a military court,
Right, that's what
and
he
then it'd be
wants
a
to do.
military court of people, and even then you have a lot of legal things. And given Hegseth's own statements about not following lawful orders just a few years ago, I'm not you know I'm not sure how that would play out. I mean, plus all they did was recite exactly what the law
I
reads.
know. It's
So
amazing. I don't know what the charge would be that
I
they read the military rules out loud. That's amazing.
Yeah, that SecDef himself, before SecDef read, then read that rules out loud, but said, paraphrased it, the whole same thing.
Right, right.
So I think there's, and what was the other second part of that?
Well, the second part was, do you think that anybody, the admiral or his underlings, considered legality of the orders when they were deciding whether to make a
That's
second strike?
that's stuff those 40 minutes were about.
Aha.
Those 40 minutes were there was back and forth on with the legal people there. I don't know if they were in the room or on the phone or wherever, but yeah, that's what that was about. I mean,
Wow. And yet they ended up
so there's
still
certainly some
doing it.
concern about that.
Mhm.
Absolutely. And my understanding is that they've gone and changed some of the policy, if you will, for it, since then. You know,
But you can see this ending up that if Hegseth gets his way and Kelly is hauled before a tribunal, a military tribunal, it could end up like the grand jury that said, no, we don't think there should be charges against Letitia.
I, I think, I mean, you never know. They could try to stack it, but even then, I'll tell you right now, right now, I think they would have a little trouble even finding the folks who would just, bring that to it. I mean, and I wonder if Kelly would have a case for wrongful prosecution or whatever. I mean, I don't
Ah,
know.
like a kind of Comey's approach. He's going to
This
go
is a
after.
lot of gray area here. Yeah, it's a lot of gray
Yeah,
area here. Not for anything. Quite honestly, if they would have done it, I think if they were going to do it, I think they would have done it
yeah,
because
yeah.
it's not if you have to investigate anything.
No, no,
He
it's
said it. They either bring to or not, and maybe I don't know this. Maybe the trouble is trying to find someone who can find somewhere some kind of legal thing they can bring forward and get all the people they'd have to do to find guilt. And maybe that's what's going on. But I just think that at this moment that seems like a little bit of grandstanding
yeah.
for a lot.
My prediction is he's going to just let this all go away because he can't win it. He just
Yeah.
can't win this. So how is it, have you, as a military reporter, have you ever covered troops in cities cleaning up parks and directing traffic and doing some of the tasks that we're seeing our soldiers do, our National Guard and military doing to keep them?
On hurricanes.
Yeah, yeah.
you know,
The National Guard,
I
right.
used to be yeah, in a previous life for a publication, I was kind of almost a little mini hurricane hunter, and sure, in hurricanes you would have troops in there doing a lot of things.
Emergencies, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, yeah. But this stuff, I mean, they first to tell you this is what they signed up for.
I
You
know. They
know,
must wonder you're going to leave your job, leave your family, and go to Washington D.C. and rake leaves. I don't know. I'm hoping that that what has become normal is that people don't like this and they think it's silly rather than it's safe to have it. It's nice to have men with guns on corners. I don't know.
that would be nice. I mean, this is a means to an end. No matter that's it's always meant to be a means
Right.
to an end. It wasn't the end itself. Having troops there is not the end itself. It's a means to the end. And it seems to me that this there's the it's not getting quite the return that they had hoped it would get.
Interesting. I have to ask, I'm going to ask you this one. Hegseth is quite on the record. He's written books about it. He's spoken out about it. He still talks about it all the time that he does not like diversity or inclusion. He does not believe women have a real place in the
Mm-hmm.
military. And it seems that he and Trump have spent quite an effort to figure out all the women in leadership and have gotten rid of quite a few of them.
Mm-hmm.
So talk about that. Are women really, or
So
minority members? Do they hold back the military? Is it
so
bad?
I'll tell you that the in particular our naval forces um, really suffered from this attitude. Um, the one on the Coast Guard, we had a commandant who had, she had broken her teeth working on a polar icebreaker.
Wow.
And by the way, our polar icebreakers are warships, and
Mhm.
they're actually the only naval force we have going up into those regions most of the time. So she was up in by the Alaskan waters with facing down the elements and our adversaries and everything like that. And she became commandant, and they relieved her.
What's her
And
name, Mike?
huh?
What is her
Uh,
name?
oh,
Uh-oh, I put you on the spot. That's
yeah, you put me on the spot. We'll come back to that. And I will. Fagan. I'm sorry,
okay.
coming on fake. Yeah, so I'm sorry that this um and they when that was done was she that was basically at a function where she's waiting to meet the president. From what I was told, it was done in a cruel way. For the U.S. Navy, our Chief of Naval Operations, Admiral Franchetti, who had, she had the experience that you would want for someone to be a CNO. I mean, there's a lot of intangibles, and you can always argue intangibles for or against someone, but she definitely had all the blocks checked off. And the one thing she was really about when she took over was getting ready for conflict with China by 2027, because of some things that China has said. And based on some things I'd done before, I thought finally we have a Navy leader who really is going in with this mindset, is really going to do something for our forces. And basically, again, with no reason other, quite honestly, that I could see other than she was a woman, that there was never anything that's brought out and said, oh, we're getting rid of her for this reason or that reason. They just got rid of her. Now, our CNO now is a fantastic CNO. Don't get me wrong. It's not like we didn't downgrade or anything like that. But there was, to get rid of her, not even halfway through her tenure, for because she's a
Yeah.
woman,
Yeah.
and that's what seemed like to me, that there was just no cause for that. And so we went out with this. We went out. We did not have a CNO for months. The vice CNO was acting CNO, so
Hmm.
doing two jobs, two incredibly high stress, high profile naval jobs at the same time.
Usually important jobs, right?
You know,
Right.
yeah, at a recent function, he, it was Admiral Kilby. He said, and I think he was being self-deprecating because he's kind of like that kind of guy. But he's like, yeah, I did these two jobs, neither one very well because, because they demand your full attention. That was his point,
Right.
and that hurt us. It did,
Yeah.
and so anyway, this I'll tell you, I have been out with forces all around the world, our forces, and men and women, and there was no difference. Let me tell you, in terms of what they could do, what they were capable of, intelligence, endurance, anything like that. I mean, there just wasn't. There, this idea, I remember in 2025 plan, and it said it basically indicated in there, paraphrased, that if our forces ever really get into it, they're so woke they would just wind up, just huddled up in a mass and crying. And and that's not the case. Men or women, I don't draw a distinction. I'll tell you right now, I draw no distinction at all when I've been out there, out and about. And quite honestly, my life was in their hands more than a few times, and it was like, you know, I was glad that I had them protecting me.
You're listening to Mike Fabey. He's a naval expert and a longtime military journalist, and he thinks a lot differently than our Secretary of War, our warrior chief now, who would find your views woke and weak. Hmm. Okay, so Mike, I want to ask you a hard question here now.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a predictive question. You referred earlier to how there was an end game in mind when Trump put soldiers into the cities. He
Mm-hmm.
wanted to make it look normal and he would be able to control more. So if it came to a matter of protests in a city, people were dissenting against Trump politics, as they did after, in the police reform and Black Lives Matter protests. And the military was called out, which Trump has really trumpeted that he would do. And they were ordered to stop a protest. What would happen? Would the military side with the government and follow orders, or would they refuse to act, which would be extraordinary?
So I think certainly you would not have like a Secretary Esper like moment, which last time Secretary Esper said no, we can't do that. You would not have that. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if Hegseth actually put their troops out there first before even being told to do it. That wouldn't surprise me. But at any rate, I do think that troops be put out there with and I don't know what those rules of engagement would be. And I think that I would not be, unfortunately, I would not be surprised if there wasn't an initial something. But I think that if you wound up something like a Kent State thing,
Yeah,
kind of
that's what I'm
event,
talking about.
I think that that would be such an uproar from all around. I really do that would be the last time they would do. I mean, back then that ended a lot of that. When you had that. So
Well, it was furious and controversial and horrifying when it happened then. Students,
you
innocent
know, you
citizens
know,
killed.
I'll tell you why. I kind of, everyone's talking about the truth, but you know, I worried a lot more about what could be, done with some of these ICE agents, and things like that. So almost like a paramilitary forces sort of being thrown here,
It's a
and could
palace
be,
guard. It's a
almost like,
palace guard they're
yeah,
trying to put
could be
together.
almost deputized, you know. I, So not for anything, I read a lot of history, and I see shades of 30s Germany, sometimes in 50s China.
You are not the only one.
Yeah,
But
so
talk about this more. What do your military sources think of this really powerful in terms of money? That it's ICE and Homeland Security now has more money than any other police force in
mhm,
history, not just in
yeah.
the United States, but anywhere. They have so much power. They're acting apparently outside the law or right on the edge of the law, at least. What does the military think about this?
So um, I, I don't want to say nothing blithely, but I will say that is not their swim lane.
Hmm.
Okay, I mean that's you know they far as they are all about defending the homeland too, but in their minds, if you are out fighting Houthis in the Red Sea, that is defending the homeland, right?
Right.
If you're out guaranteed safe passage for commercial ships through the up through the straits around the world, that is defending the homeland. So, and that's what the way they look at it. That's what they're about. So that's I I've not run. Now they have personal opinions about this, personal opinions.
And
But
favorable or negative?
well, I mean, right now, what they're saying, quite honestly, is a lot of their own either actually members of the military or their family members getting caught up in this and being deported. And,
Wow.
and and so personally, the ones I've talked to are kind of upset about that. I mean, you know, you give it your all for your country, you put it all on the line, and the next thing you or your wife or your father could wind up you know on a plane to some other country, and even though they've they've done it, they pretty much lived these decent lives by all accounts. I mean, or at least all public accounts. You know, um, you have the faction here that says, "Hey, they're here illegally. And that's all there is to it." Certainly, our Secretary of Homeland Security has gone and told Congress that if they're here legally, fine. If they're here illegally, well, that's it. The rest of the country doesn't seem, well, I wouldn't say the rest of the country, but a good part of the rest of the country doesn't seem very cool with that. It seems like they're like, wait a minute, you know, if they're, you know, members of our community and they are supporting our community and putting back into the community, that counts for something.
Right. Right.
That's way, and so the military, but as a whole thing, it's like stuff that goes in the homeland. That's just not, I want to, I don't want to like not their business, but in a way, it's not. I mean, their business is, keeping America safe at that military level. So
Right.
yeah.
Right. Not getting involved in this domestic stuff.
Hmm.
We are talking with Mike Fabey. I told you I knew him back when he was very young and just learning investigative reporting. He learned it very well. And in addition to all kinds of articles, he's written two books. I want you to take a minute, Mike, if you would, to talk about Crashback and Heavy Metal, the two
Okay.
books that you did, and how they relate to what's happening today. Because they're about, as you point out, a military very different than the one that Hegseth is trying to build today.
Yeah. So Crashback, I feel almost you could release it today and to say, it's pulled from the headlines. Crashback talked about how we were squaring off against China in the Western Pacific and China's their desire to control and rule the world, but not militarily. That isn't what they're about, but economically. Is certainly what they're about. And if you look around, I mean, they've made quite a few strides and continue to make strides along that, along those pathways. Um,
This
you
book
know,
came
I
out when? When did Crashback come out?
let's see, 2017,
Okay, so a few years back, the first
a few years
the
back,
first Trump administration.
right? Yep,
How are
yep.
they doing
So
now? How's the U.S. doing versus China military power and political influence around the world?
so well, the so there's always this question. One of the things I bring up, especially when it comes to naval things, and let's face it, any kind of conflict with China in the West Pacific is going to be naval, and everyone brings up that China right now is just kicking our butt when it comes to naval shipbuilding, a shipbuilding of any kind, and building forces and everything like that, and even in some certain technological areas. And actually, I concede that when it comes to shipbuilding and everything else, they are definitely way outpacing us.
Wow.
Um, having said that, and one of the things I put in Crashback, and actually I still find this to be true, is that China's never ever done anything with this navy. Even going back to ancient times, it didn't fight any naval wars. Had these huge
Wow.
ships that went around and called it places because of their size. Everyone sort of bowed down to them, but they've never actually, been out there. All the stuff that they
Interesting.
have, it works theoretically, but it's never been proven. One of the things I've learned in going out into combat and in military exercises and everything like that is nothing works like it's supposed to. You know, it just doesn't. Hegseth said that thing about fog of war, but he's really trying to use it as a dodge, thing. But there's a fog of operations. Nothing works like it's supposed to. Well, our our people are really incredibly great at. It's amazing how good they are about this. These are a bunch of MacGyvers. They're out there saying, okay, this is not working, but I have this, all this equipment, and I needed to do that. And then they put their heads together, and it's amazing. Even the lowest ensign can come up, and say, well, wait, we tried it. And they will come up with something that works. And
Mhm.
that's the thing is that, and this is when bombs are flying and everything else. We have, we've been tempered like steel in the fire of combat and conflict and when chaos.
Let me ask you
And
this. This is a tangent, Mike, but I'm
yeah,
interested in
yeah,
this, and you reminded me of it. When 3 years ago now, when Russia was poised to just like move in on Ukraine, we all predicted, oh, this is going to be a bloodbath. It's going to be
you're right.
the second biggest army, most powerful army, not military, not just army in the world after ours. And it's been 3 years, and they're kind of slogging on. They've learned a lot about drones, but it still goes
Yeah.
on. Is this part of the same thing? They just hadn't tested, they hadn't worked, or what was the
Well, see
failure?
now Russia had been tested. Russia was a wartime juggernaut at one time. It's just that through the decades
From
of
World War
having,
II.
that the money was going anywhere it was supposed to go. They weren't maintaining their forces. They didn't keep them up. That's their land forces. Let me tell you right now, Russian submarines are still top notch.
Uh-huh.
It's still there. It's still an incredible force to be reckoned with. But their land forces and obviously their surface Navy forces, they just hadn't really
Okay.
kept up with them, hadn't maintained them. So that's a little different than with China having all this new stuff that they know, in theory works. They're for the last, I don't know, 10 years or so, they've had these missiles out as a DF series, DF-21, DF-22, all those, they like putting numbers and letters, things. But these missiles, they basically call them carrier killers. They can go thousands of kilometers, and take out and basically go overseas and take out a carrier, they said. And all these congressmen and senators were like, oh, we they were ready to cut the carrier fleet because China had these weapons and everything like that. And then it was they would go in for these classified briefings and come out smile on their faces and like the old Rosanna banana dana. Oh, never mind. Because there's two things. One is we get, the US gets a say in that, and our defense of our as is proven in the Red Sea.
Hmm. Hmm.
Our defense systems are great. But the other thing is, in theory, sure, China can shoot. They've proven they can shoot a missile a long way, and they've proven they can hit a outline of a target drawn on the ground with these
Wow.
things. That's
Hmm.
it. Honestly, that is it. It's a lot different when you got a carrier that can move like 40 knots or so, with a nuclear
Yeah.
reactor, pushing away, and is has this layered defense that is just absolutely phenomenal. It's not foolproof, trust me, but it is pretty dark. So it's a totally different thing. You're not going to go up and park a carrier right off of off the Chinese coast. That's different. Then you're going to have like, you think you got a lot of missiles and drones coming from the Houthis. It's nothing compared with China
Right.
with ship.
Right.
But they're not going to, they're not going to chase us out of the Pacific kind of thing.
So
So
speaking of carriers, your
mhm.
second book, Heavy Metal, is specifically about the building and the construction of those. Talk about that a little bit too.
Yeah, so is one of these things that I had um got my first decent sized newspaper job, daily newspaper jobs, Daily Press in Newport News, Virginia, and I went down there to visit and drive around, and and I was driving down the road and I saw this huge gantry cranes and this outline silhouette of a carrier. I'm like, what the heck is this? I mean, I'm from Philly and I still was like just taken aback by this cityscape that include this carrier silhouette. I'm like, who does that? How do they do that? How do you build a carrier? And then when I was living there, I got to know these shipbuilders and just realized that this is art and love and a patriotic thing. I mean, for them, it's a whole way of life that is just as much as a kind of a service to our country because they don't make a whole lot of money as people in other uniforms. And so I just really want to tell the story of the yard and the stories of those who worked in the yard of bring these ships to existence, create
Wow.
them, that basically go out and ensure that we enjoy the life we enjoy in a way. Yeah.
Wow, that's very cool. That you can see why I like talking to Mike Fabey, and we've talked over the years, but the particular reason that I asked him to come on the podcast now is because he recently returned from a really interesting trip that I really want you to talk about now, Mike. You visited Greenland, which is in the
Mm-hmm.
also in recent months.
Yep. So it's I've been doing some stuff in the Arctic. I'm on for another book proposal. Well, we got floating around. I've been going up to the Arctic a bit, Atlantic Arctic, Norwegian Arctic, with sometimes with our folks in uniform, sometimes my own. And so I had this interest in it. And then you start listening to Trump's comments regarding Greenland, and I'm like, well, what's that about? But you never know because sometimes he likes to dangle like a shiny thing, and
Hmm.
hey, well, look at this, and and it's not really anything that's going to happen from us. So, even though it was even in the original State of the Union, you know, I, still it's like, well, what's going on there? Well, I did was at this dinner one time with some officials from administration from Greenland, and Greenland is a part of the Kingdom of Denmark, and
Uh-huh.
so there's some Danes were there, and it became clear to me that this was actually a a a, a thing for people beyond Trump. That there is a conservative segment, within our within administration, within government, that it really feels that Greenland needs to be a much more official part of the U.S.
Okay.
Um, you know, it's there's and it plays an incredibly strategic, geopolitically speaking, part role in the defense of the northern flank for North America. It really is. That's Russian subs that want to come down into the land. They gotta have to go right through the gap right there,
Hmm. Hmm.
and and it just is really very important. So they are afraid, they being the folks this conservative group, they're afraid that China is going to make some investments in there, and China, the way China operates is they invest in a place. Is it's a loan most of the time, and then they have these basically terms for a loan, and usually governments can't necessarily pay up, and the next thing you know, they own the property, they own the pieces, and then they have to put quote unquote security forces, and so they were afraid basically of a kind of a Chinese Cuba like thing up in our
Uh-huh.
northern flank, and and this was a very real fear for them, and this so this is a serious thing. That's not just this Trump saying this, that there's this faction that wants this too, that they really are pushing for this. And so with that, I just said, you know what? Um, I have to go. Because you heard, from, on TV, we saw certain things in Greenland, and then you heard Greenlanders didn't they want to be away from Denmark, but they don't want US. And then you heard from other people saying, "Oh no, they really want the US protection." I mean, that's mostly from Trump officials, but anyway, that's what you were hearing. And I was like, I've always been of the mind, you want to find out, you go yourself. I mean,
What'd you find when you went?
so I'll tell you that I found that um, the Greenlanders just don't understand, what the fuss is about, in a way that they can't understand how these foreigners are fighting over this land that isn't theirs. you know I mean the foreigners land is like, what, this isn't yours. Why are you saying you're going to do this, and you're going it's not yours. This is our land. And actually, the right around, I think, around 80%, I think that's the number I see quoted most often, of Greenlanders are Inuit. And Inuits don't really, they, land ownership isn't a thing of theirs. That's
Right, right.
like
Oops.
the houses over there. They'll own a house, but not the land that's on, or land that's around. If you want to walk through someone's yard, go right ahead, because that's free open space. So, because for them, it's all the Arctic and subarctic, and that's just, everyone has a right to use it. So everyone owns it, and no one owns it. You use it to survive. I
Right.
mean, right now, Greenlanders, for the most part, most Greenlanders actually still subsist by hunting and stuff.
Hmm.
It's still a thing. So, but they also are not the type to go. You're not going to see, like, at least I talking to him, and I didn't see any evidence of this. Big protest and stuff like that, rallies against the U.S. or against Russia or against China, or whatever. Um, they would, obviously they really want to separate themselves more from Denmark. There's been an effort to do that since the late 70s, to kind of like go off on their own
Right. Autonomous.
more. And yeah, I got the impression, you never know. I mean, it's just an impression thing, that had not the Trump folks been like this, we're going to take you over, where you like it or not attitude, that probably, Greenlanders would have like started tilting towards the U.S. anyway, U.S. and or Canada.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
that they,
It's
but
like
they,
so much of Trump, isn't it? That he somehow hits on the right issue, but then ruins it by going too far, too fast, too macho.
yeah, I mean, I don't know that, but I mean, and like, not necessarily anything official, but just a very strong, good, vibrant relationship.
Hmm.
The very interesting thing about this is that, because of all this, really, Denmark now has actually started to stitch itself back into Greenland, Greenlandic
Right, right.
society even
Politics.
more.
Hmm.
Not even politics. It's, for example, I sat down with the head of the Joint Arctic Command there, which is, Danish, which means basically it's the NATO Joint Arctic Command. And they start these programs where they're getting Greenlanders to come into the force, or they put them on ships
Ah,
sometimes to help with translations when they go out to small villages and stuff. Because Greenland, no towns are connected. You don't have any roads or anything. I mean, you have streets within the towns, but nothing. There's no connection between them.
right,
So,
right.
getting around Greenland is can be interesting. And I got grounded there and stranded there. And if you're stranded, you're stranded. Um,
I read your report on that. It was
yeah.
amazing. Malcolm Nance, who's a former military man and a spy turned journalist, also made a trip to Greenland. And his point of view was he wanted to see if the United States could take it, to put it in war terms.
I might be able
How
to.
hard? And he thought it would be quite an operation because of some of the things you're talking about, the lack of infrastructure, the difficulty getting around, the cold.
Well, here's something to consider. We have a base there up in is Pacific,
Right.
so
JD
space
Vance
base,
went there this year.
huh?
JD Vance went there this year.
Yep, he did. And then quickly fired the woman commander.
Yes.
Um, so we have to replenish that base every year, right? We have to hire Canadian icebreakers to replenish that base
Why is that?
because we don't have the force to do it.
We don't have the icebreakers to go that far.
Yeah, and so that's one thing. And I was talking to the Joint Arctic Command commander about any kind of invasion. He he was very quick to point out that when it comes to military, it's business as usual. None of this stuff is trickling down to them. But he was saying he doesn't lose any sleep at any kind of invasion. And why? Because any kind of invasion down there would quickly end up a rescue mission. And you could think that's an exaggeration. Talk to the U.S. Army folks who had to be rescued by the U.S. Coast Guard out in the Alaskan waters just a few years back.
Mhm.
I mean, these fords are so in Norway, you have, it's almost just, basically the same kind of, latitude around. But Norway, it's a very industrial place. You have all these towns and villages right on there, and you're connected by railroads and everything like that. And so if you land, you have as you point out, infrastructure to do certain things and everything like that. And those fords are actually, they're not pretty, but they're somewhat accessible. I watched, amphibious operations there for a week one time in the middle of winter. The fords that you have in Greenland are just, I mean, they'd be a nightmare. And if you got to them, okay, now down south, there's a little more few more towns, right? But if you take out town, you're not like taking out a whole region because they're not going to
Right,
make it.
right.
But anywhere else, you get over ford, you're on the ice cap.
Wow.
And it's not like you can just go across the ice cap. The Joint Arctic Command, do you know how they do most of their patrols across the ice cap?
No.
Dog sleds
Hmm.
combined with drones. They put drone units on with the dog sled teams and everything, and they take them out.
Wow.
So
It sounds like this is going to be a good book, Mike. You have a good proposal.
we're talking to some folks. We've got a proposal. It's a little tougher than it was a few years ago for lots of reasons.
Sure.
But it's we're and it's also a little bit of hitting a moving target for certain things too.
Hmm.
So, but
Well, listen, we are running fast out of time, but I'll bring you on when the new book comes out. That sounds
absolutely love to
And we traditionally
enjoy.
end our chapters with a toast. And I want to toast you and the other military journalists for your service. It's one thing to have a great military to protect us. I get how important that is. And we have not treated, the press has not treated the military well in our past. I remember Vietnam, we were rude and crude. But now to work to show what they do accurately, as you write, that's what you're writing, Mike, is you're showing what they really do and why it's important and why we should support them and hope that the military will support us if we need it against our politicians in the future.
I tell you, I work with the greatest bunch of folks. I mean, we compete, no, don't get me wrong, but the folks that cover the military with me are top notch. They really are. That's they really are, and they
Well,
take their jobs seriously. And
I was
this is
so proud of them when they walked out of the Pentagon and said, "No,
yeah,
we're not going to agree to
yeah.
censorship." Not
Unfortunately,
today.
I had another. I mean, I turned in my badge that earlier that day, but I didn't do the walkout with everyone
That
else.
was that was
It
that was
was
good. So we end the show. Thank you, Mike Fabey, for being with us, and a
a
toast to
pleasure.
investigative military journalists. Good night.